Welcome to the Crunch McDabbles Show. I'm your host, Crunch McDabbles. Today, we're deciding whether we want to fork the path or expand the portal. It's the Kineticist, the class that channels power directly from the elemental planes. It's pretty much a blaster spellcaster with an eye for disaster, but it doesn't have a spell list, and it uses magical actions instead of spells. They're definitely not spells. So let's take a look at all the moving parts on this delicious chicken McNugget of a class, shall we? Our first bit of terminology is the kinetic gate. It says we've awakened or opened a kinetic gate. Of course, a question arises, is it a real gate? No, it's not an actual gate. It's a metaphor. This kinetic gate is a supernatural conduit within your body that can channel elemental forces straight from the elemental planes. Basically, your kinetic gate is the source of your power as a kineticist. There are 6 elements your kinetic gate can access: air, earth, fire, metal, water, and wood. At first level, you can choose to have either one element, which is called a single gate, or 2 elements, which is called a dual gate. And then at level 5, 9, 13, and 17, you can either get stronger in an existing element or add a new element that your gate can access. Channel elements. You tap into your kinetic gate to make elements flow around you. Channel elements is a single action kineticist class ability that activates your kinetic aura. And as part of this action, you can use a 1-action elemental blast or a 1-action stance impulse. Your kinetic aura is a 10-foot emanation, and in that space there are pieces of the element swirling around you. Mind you, these are just cosmetic, but they are kind of cool for flavor. The most important part about your kinetic aura is that it has to be activated for you to use impulses. Impulses for a kineticist are magical actions that allow them to wield or shape their element into diverse and powerful forms. They are not spells. It clearly says in the book that they are not spells. And it clearly says in the book that they are magical actions. They are definitely not spells. Even if they are spells, they are definitely not spells. Each element has 15 unique impulse feats specifically for that element, so you have a lot of options for each element. Impulses are flavorful too, and they're pretty powerful. Pretty powerful, I know, they're pretty good. And you can use them over and over. There's no spell slots. Also, you get a lot of them. You get extra impulse feats in addition to your normal class feats, 2 at first level, and another at level 5, 9, 13, and 17. That is 6 bonus impulse feats. Thank you very much. There are all kinds of impulses. There are impulses that deal damage with saving throws and impulses with attack rolls. There are impulses that buff, that heal, that debuff. There are impulses that put you in a stance. There are impulses that create walls and control a battlefield. There are impulse reactions that mitigate damage. There are impulses that create armor around you and put a functioning shield in your hand. They do a lot of cool things. Overflow impulses. Your 2 and 3 action impulses also can be 2 action overflow impulses and 3 action overflow impulses. An overflow impulse means it sucks the life out of your kinetic aura, like a Hoover on a dirty floor, or me when it's lasagna for dinner. It sucks the life right out of it. When you use an impulse that has the overflow trait, your kinetic aura deactivates until you revitalize it. But you don't have to worry if your kinetic aura is deactivated, because you can reactivate it with that single action channel elements. And when you do, you get a free single action elemental blast or a free single action stance impulse as part of that action. So you can see this loop here going around in a circle, activating your kinetic aura, then using a strong overflow impulse that sucks the life out of it, and then channeling elements again to reactivate it. So you could go around and around here. But let's look at all the possibilities here to see what really is going on. Here is the basic blast and burst. Use a 2-action impulse to burst out some damage on the battlefield, and then followed up with a single action elemental blast. You're getting 2 good attacks, and you don't have to deal with the multiple attack penalty, and you can rinse and repeat this one over and over again. And notice this as well, that the basic blast and burst gives you flexibility because of this single action elemental blast here. You can swap out the smaller damage elemental blast for a different single action that might be needed in the round. For example, let's say an enemy moves up to you. At this point, maybe it would be better to use that third action to cast armor on yourself, or raise a shield, or just move away. It starts getting more complicated with overflows. If we drop a 2-action overflow in here, we deal some nasty overflow damage, but then our kinetic aura is depleted. However, we can still use this last action in the round to channel elements to activate our aura again. And as part of that action, we can use a single action elemental blast again. So it's interesting then that that round looks exactly the same as the basic blast and burst. We got a burst, and then we got a blast, and we keep our aura active. The difference is we don't have as much flexibility here, because if we swap this action out and don't channel elements, then our turn ends and we don't have our kinetic aura active. 3-action overflows guarantee that we end our turn without an active kinetic aura. That means on the next round, you have to spend an action to channel elements to get your aura active so you can use your impulses again. You won't have enough actions for a 3-action overflow, so you're going to stagger back and forth between 2 different kinds of rounds. At level 19 with Final Gate, the class feature, you have a free action that can be used to channel elements at the start of your turn. This allows you to use 3-action overflow impulses each round and get a single action elemental blast with it. However, even with Final Gate, since the free action is at the start of your turn, you still can't keep your aura active when your turn ends. That is until level 20 if you take the Kinetic Pinnacle feat, the class feat, and use your quickened action to channel elements again. But you have to wait till level 20 to pull that maneuver off. Why is it important to end your turn with your kinetic aura active? Without an aura, we lose several benefits. Number 1, you don't get any of the benefits of your aura, which could include aura junction benefits, your elemental resistance, or your skill junction benefit, if you have any of those. Number 2, you don't get the benefits of any of the stances, because stance impulses are linked to your kinetic aura and they end when the aura deactivates. And this can include any defensive benefits or effects that go off at the start of a monster's turn, such as the damage from Thermal Nimbus or any number of other things. And number 3, you can't use impulses. And this means that you can't use those damage mitigating impulse reactions. And those reactions are awesome, so you're not going to be able to do those. The strategy with overflows just comes down to weighing the risk of not having your aura with the reward of the bigger effects of the overflow. Other options for your round could be more focused on the elemental blast. Maybe you do a 2-action elemental blast and follow it up with a single action elemental blast. Maybe you do 3 single action elemental blasts. There could be a place for this against low armor class enemies. I just think for my money, why deal with the multiple attack penalty when you don't have to? I try to keep my kineticist down to just 1 attack per round. Now, this does get a little tricky here, and this is where we should map out some damages. Let's start with the elemental blasts. Here's the D8 variety, and they increase a die at the same levels that you get the gates threshold, 5, 9, 13, and 17. Now, for comparison, let's map out a couple of the impulses. For first level non-overflow impulses, Winter's Clutch and Aerial Boomerang are both the 2d4 at first level that increases another d4 every 2 levels. And then Shard Strike and Flying Flame are the 1d6 every 2 level variety. Of course, the Fire Impulse moves this up to a d8 for the Flying Flame. That's pretty nice. Then, for first level overflows, Tremor is pretty darn good. I love this spell. It's not a spell. It's 2 actions. It starts out as a D8, but then it starts adding D10s every other level. I do like that one. And we'll leave it at that. That's a pretty good approximation of what you can get from these impulses. Of course, a fire kineticist using a solar detonation on a pack of zombies is going to light them up like kindling, but that's a pretty niche situation. Back to the elemental blasts. You could turn these into a 2-action version and add your constitution attribute to the damage, and that looks nice. And even better, you could make it a melee attack or use a weapon infusion to make it a thrown attack, and you could add your strength in there also, and that almost doubles the damage at first level anyways. And as you level up though, this doesn't keep pace, and then the overflows and regular impulses by like level 6 or 7, they're going to start putting out better damage, even than that situation, even better than using your strength and your constitution added in. The moral of the story is, early on, you could get a lot of mileage out of these 2-action melee blasts, but even at early levels, it still has that problem that you spent your 2 actions in the round on an attack. So now you just have 1 action left over, so you have to use another attack, your elemental blast, your single action, which is going to have the multiple attack penalty, the map. So you put yourself in a tough spot there, chasing that high damage. Here is the sweet spot. Use a single action elemental blast each round, either as a melee attack or using a weapon infusion and making it as a thrown weapon attack. To me, that seems like the best case scenario. You're getting some extra static damage on the attack, but you aren't using 2 actions to do it, which leaves 2 actions each round to drop an impulse. The only drawback is, well, there are actually 2 drawbacks. You have to get close to the bad guys to do this, and you need strength. And I think both of those are reasonable with the kineticist. They can get up close, and they're not multiple attribute dependent, so they can put points in strength, no problem at all. So let's keep looking at the other tools in your toolbox, like impulse stances, to see how those stack up. Impulse stances seem pretty good and can be combined with aura junctions. These add various combinations of defenses, resistances, debuffs, buffs, and even some damage and some healing. It seems like it would be smart to get these to work with your build, but you just have to consider how it's going to work with your overflows. Several impulses can be sustained each round, giving you a spell effect for a single action. On top of this, at level 12, you can take the effortless impulse feat, which lets you sustain an impulse as a free action, which is great because classes are waiting until level 16 to get this feat, and you're getting it at level 12. That's awesome. Number 1, there are wall spells that can be sustained to control the battlefield. Number 2, there are form spells that give you some elemental powers and benefits. Those need to be sustained. Number 3, if you take the fearsome familiar feat at level 6, you can turn your familiar into a summoned elemental 4 levels below you, just like a summoned monster, and give them 2 actions each round with that sustain. That's a free action at level 12, so that actually is kind of a good deal. Number 4, there are attack impulses, which give an impulse attack roll type of impulse, which is okay, except that adds to your map. So any other attack roll you make is going to have a penalty, such as your elemental blast. Might not be great to use that one. Number 5, there are a couple of damage burst impulses that have a saving throw. I think these are the best, but there are only a few good ones. That being Conductive Sphere. Well, these are the 3 I like. Conductive Sphere, Sanguivolent Roots, and Ignite the Sun. Though Ignite the Sun is a pretty high level. My favorite there is Sanguivolent Roots. Maybe a reason to fork the path at level 13 and add wood to your kineticist and sustain this action every round, dealing a small amount of damage in a burst and getting a little heal along with it. And it's kind of a fun effect. I don't know. That could be fun. So how do you build one? The outline for a kineticist build is pretty simple. At first level, you choose either a single gate with the junction or a dual gate. Then at 5th, 9th, 13th, and 17th level, you can either expand the portal and gain a junction for one of your elements, or fork the path and gain a new element. So every kineticist is somewhere either highly specialized in a single element or a few elements, or spread out over multiple elements, or somewhere in between. So you can see here, you're either going to have between 1 and 6 elements and between 0 and 5 junctions. So you could have 1 element and 5 junctions, 2 elements and 4 junctions, 3 elements and 3 junctions, 4 elements and 2 junctions, or 5 elements and 1 junction, or 6 elements and no junctions. I don't think there's a huge advantage or disadvantage to one over the other. One way has more power from junctions, which are great, while the other has more power from flexibility and options. A mix is going to be somewhere in between there. And I'm not sure if there's a sweet spot or not. It's just advantages and disadvantages to each one. Have at it, however you want to do it. For example, if you went all in on one element, you would have 6 junction abilities. That is the most you can get. All of those abilities are pretty cool, and that would certainly be powerful. However, if you started with a dual gate and then forked the path each time, you would have all the elements but no junctions. It's still powerful though, because with reflow elements, you can retrain feats with your daily preparations, which means you would have access to every single impulse in the game. Even better, with omnikinesis, you could change to any feat in the book with a single action. And there are a lot of good impulses in there, and having access to every one of them, that's a pretty powerful tool too. So how do you design a kineticist? Here's my advice. Step 1, look over all the impulses and find some that you like, that seem worth making your build around. It's fine if they're in different elements. It's fine if they aren't. Just find some impulses that you think are fun and great. Step 2, look over all the impulse junctions and the gate junctions for whichever elements you chose in step 1, and then decide which ones really help you get the most out of your impulses. Then once you know that, what the impulses you want and what junctions you want, then you can just kind of work backwards and figure out at what levels you need to fork and which levels you need to expand so that you can get the abilities that you want as soon as possible. So, for example, let's say I look over all the impulses and I like the aerial boomerang. I'm looking at this and I see that on the second round and every round after, I can return the boomerang as a single action and then throw it again, which means I'm essentially getting 2 spells in one round, which is unusual, and I want to take advantage of that. It's hard to get 2 spells in one round, right? I also like the idea of the desert wind stance to add a little damage to my air impulses. That means I'm going to need the earth element as well, because that one is a composite impulse. So that's step 1. Next, step 2, I look over at the impulse junctions and gate junctions, and right away the air impulse junction is a must-have to get that free movement with an air impulse. That's awesome. All of the other junctions seem okay. I wouldn't mind having any of them, but they aren't really important to my build. Nothing really jumps out at me. This means I have some flexibility, right? I could put whatever I want in there, either other elements or more junctions. It's up to me at that point because nothing's really necessary. Then all of a sudden I notice I have earth and wind, so all I need to do is add fire, and I have an earth, wind, and fire build. So let's do that, obviously. This tells me exactly what I need to do. I'm going to start with a single gate and grab the air impulse junction for the free movement. At first level, I'm moving into position, and I'm boomeranging exactly how I want. At 5th level, I fork the path so I can access earth elements. At 6th level, I can take desert wind. Then at 9th level, I fork the path again to add fire to my build. And then at 13th and 17th level, I take the fire aura junction and the fire impulse junction. So then, in addition to the boomerang trick, the earth, wind, and fire build, it likes to lightning dash through enemies for a fistful of D12s, and I'm adding up to 8 damage on top of that from desert wind without worrying about whether they are in my aura, because I'm literally taking my aura with me as I dash. And I'm wearing earth and plate armor the whole time, so that's really neat. For a larger area of effect, I can assume Earth's mantle and become size large, and then dash through the battlefield, doubling my area of effect. At later levels, I can use thermal nimbus. At later levels, I can use thermal At later levels, I can use thermal nimbus, ignite the sun, and the fire aura junction to see how many times I can burn enemies in one round. First, with my free action at the start of my turn, I sustain ignite the sun, increasing its burst and adding weakness damage. 2, I cast a 2-action flying flame and add the weakness damage to all those enemies in my aura. 3, I use my last action to shoot out an elemental blast. If I hit, I add the weakness damage there, and if I critically hit, I add the persistence damage as well. 4, at the start of the enemy's turns, they take damage with no saving throw, and they have weakness to the damage if they're in my aura. 5, if the monster damages me, I use my volcanic escape reaction to give them a handful of D8 damage plus the weakness. And 6, at the end of the monster's turn, if they have persistent fire damage, they take the fire damage and that weakness triggers again. I could get that weakness to trigger 6 times in a round. And that is it. I've been your host, Crunch McDabbles. This has been the Crunch McDabbles Show. Survive Galarian with an air kineticist, earth, wind, and fire, dashing out boomerangs and all that other stuff. That was kind of fun.